once we start hitting record, we can put this on the website and email it out to all the members, so we can have this go out to all 260 members.
That'd be terrific. I'm perfectly happy to do that. So let's begin the recording and go ahead and get started. Rich?
Okay. Welcome, everyone. And I just want to bring up 2 points before we get going. The first point is, hey, I think we all survived Thanksgiving. And number 2, we survived Monday, yesterday. So here we are, today being Tuesday. And welcome for attending this session. And for those of you that plan on listening to this recording later on, it'll be just as relevant. Okay, now the subject matter today is called Making the World Safer Through Technology. And we've kind of all heard of this before. It's been around for a while. But the fact of the matter is, with technology, it goes faster than the speed of business, if you will. So significant technological leaps and bounds have taken the way into productive learning and leading and that type of thing. And one of the things that we in the EHS industry are always looking at is, hey, we know what our lagging indicators are. What can we do with leading indicators? And this is one of those areas with technological advancement which is what helps us into looking at predictive observations and implementing corrective action solutions. So the data and the analytic solutions, they're all aimed at getting where the workers in a healthier setting, safer setting, without compromising productivity. And we do this through reducing the hazards out there in the workplace, risk exposures. Our speaker today, Tom West, will talk about a very robust safety management software platform coming in the way of innovative wearable technology. You can see that on his right arm, or I should say left arm right now. And what it does, unlike some of the other wearables that are out there, it gives you immediate real-time EHS data that's easy to understand, easy to view, and it gives you a nice predictive value. So our presenter hails from Des Moines, Iowa. That's his backyard, okay? So that's where he's speaking from today. And he is the Vice President of Marketing at Make You Safe Company. I also want to note that Tom is also the owner and founder of Agile Learning Group. And he's also a current professor at Des Moines Community College. In fact, he's got over 36 years of teaching and training in this industry. So he's well-versed in how to get the message across from his head to the student or the learner, if you will. And even as a professor, I know in those capacities, as you're doing this, you're always learning too from the students, because they're always bringing unique solutions or problems to a situation. And so it's really a two-way street. So Tom is one of those guys that I don't think will ever stop learning. That's it's in his DNA. He is also a professional designation, senior professional in HR from SHRM, and a certified occupational safety and health specialist. So please, everyone, welcome Tom West.
Thanks very much, Rich. Good morning, everyone, and happy holidays. Today is Giving Tuesday, and I couldn't think of how to be with a more giving group of people than to share my morning with safety professionals. And as Rich was saying, I've got an extensive background. After our 2 co-founders, I was an early investor and advisor into Make You Safe, the company that you're going to be hearing about this morning. And I found what we were doing 5 years ago to be so important and relevant, timely, that I've put aside everything else in my life, a couple of companies that Rich was mentioning, and this will be the first full year in nearly 30 years that I haven't been teaching in a classroom as well. So Make You Safe is what I do now full time, and I'm happy to be with you. And I do an awful lot of this, as many of us have, speaking and presenting, and of course meeting virtually over the last couple of years in the challenges that we've had. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and that may shut off my camera here, I believe. So before I do that, I'm going to hold up a wearable device. Rich was pointing out this armband that I'm wearing. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to put one sort of close to the camera here and show you that this matchbox sized or thumb sized device is really quite small and quite impressive. I'm going to give you an overview, not a sales pitch, but an overview of the innovative technology that we've created to solve a problem that is aimed directly at the safety profession, making safety management more effective and efficient, making the lives of safety leaders easier so you can work smarter, not harder, and identifying risks and hazards proactively and preventatively so that we can help you send more people home safely each day. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Please bear with me for just a moment. As Rich was pointing out, I've got an awful lot of connection with the state of Michigan. And I've pretty much seen all parts of your region. I've been to the Cherry Festival in Traverse City. I've sailed Lake Michigan, and I've got family throughout central and western Michigan. My wife's family is from there, but it's quite a large tribe. So for the past 20 years, I've seen an awful lot of the state. Let's move on here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Make You Safe. Make You Safe, as Rich pointed out, is based here in West Des Moines, Iowa. So we're a Midwestern company. We're about 5.5 years old now, and I've been on board for pretty much all of that. Our mission is really focused on making the world safer through the use of technology and data. And we're feeling quite proud that we're gaining an awful lot of attention, and we're very thankful, grateful for the recognition that we've been receiving. And I put this slide in there really to point out that this really comes in two forms. We've been extremely well received by the safety community, and we get an awful lot of exposure there, and certainly talking to ASSP chapters, being at conferences and such is part of that, a good example of that. But one of the benefits of being here in the Midwest and here in Des Moines especially is that there are an awful lot of insurance companies here, and we've been equally well received in the work comp and property and casualty insurance world as well. We've received an awful lot of awards, most recently the Business Insurance Innovator of the Year Award. We were a recipient of just a few weeks ago, and we're quite proud. This is our CEO, Gabe Glenn, who's actually a former student of mine and developed into a lifelong friend. Before Make You Safe, I had helped him with a couple of other businesses that he started and successfully exited. And recently he was on the cover of Smart Manufacturing magazine telling a story about how he wouldn't be here unless by chance his great grandfather walked out of a factory for lunch to have a meal with his new bride. And unfortunately, that factory exploded 101 or 102 years ago here in Iowa. So his entire family really has been very much immersed in manufacturing and industry. Gabe's dad was a safety leader at an organization where he was responsible for more than 1,200 workers. And you know, his comment here is very well placed. You know, what we're doing in terms of workforce wearable technology and using technology to solve a problem and connecting the worker is probably the next evolution of safety. It's the future of PPE, if you will. I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about how this works. And really, this is based on a very simple premise, a simple idea. In fact, Rich knows this, maybe others have heard this, but Gabe went to visit his dad and take him out to lunch one day, and it was not a good day for his dad. He went to his facility and OSHA had shown up and he was being investigated for potential hearing loss claim. And Gabe started to ask questions that are really aimed at this simple idea that in these environments, in every industrial environment, in every job site, construction job site, in every warehouse, in every facility, there are clues that exist which represent potential risks and hazards that people face in doing their jobs. Rich commented earlier, these are often referred to as leading indicators, right? That we should be paying attention to. Even OSHA is thinking about how to build standards around leading indicators. The challenge is they're often difficult to get access to. For 5 years now, I've been asking how many of you get as many near misses or good catches or observations from the front line as you would like, or as you think actually happen, right? These are leading indicators as well. And for 5 years, I've been hearing that we don't get nearly enough, probably not nearly as many as are actually happening. So what we've done is create technology that begins to gather this data automatically, easily, very effectively and efficiently. And now we can send that data to our cloud computing platform where we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning so that we can conduct analytics and provide safety leaders right out of the box with insights and optics into where these potential risks lie. That enables proactive safety management so that you can prevent injuries based on this data that has predictive value. And I'll show you examples of the kind of data that we're collecting and how that works. And I'll give you some, in the second half of this presentation, we're going to walk through some actual use cases, customer data, user data that's been collected in a variety of industries and environments. And we'll talk a little bit about the value of that data. But let's start with this. Why should you care? Why listen to Tom today? Well, first and foremost, 5 years ago, I was talking about the value of making sure that nothing happens, right? That's often a difficult argument to make. Now we've got actual data with third-party partners, insurance companies and their policyholders, some of whom are riches actually, that shows that as we collect data, we're seeing a reduction in accidents and a reduction in claims. Claims frequency and total number of claims being reduced by half. Claim severity for those incidents that still happen is being reduced by as much as 90%. And that's after as little as 6 months of usage. Some other benefits here, we're increasing communication, increasing transparency. We're gathering more of those near misses and good catches from the frontline workers, and I'll show you how we do that. But we're doing it in a culture building way. I know all of you are probably thinking actively about this big idea called culture and how to impact safety culture and safety mindset in a positive way, and it's often seems insurmountable. Well, let's make that more reasonable and easy to understand. We're uncovering unknowns, things that were previously hard to detect or just completely unidentified. We're simplifying the life of the EHS manager through documentation and process improvement. There are two sides to our solution, one side seems to get the immediate attention, and that's wearable technology. But the other half is really the soul of what we're doing, and that's a software platform that acts as a safety and health management system. And we're having an impact even beyond safety into the efficiency and productivity of workers. We're impacting quality and process improvements. So that's, operations and production impact. So I'll paint a picture for you. How does this work exactly? Well, envision, if you will, that a worker walks into their facility for the day, and they walk up to what we call our Make You Safe base station. This is really a wall-mounted kiosk, has a keypad on it, as you can see here, and they simply enter their unique identifier, could be an employee ID number, and one of the 20 bays in this base station will flash green, like I'm showing here on the screen. A worker removes that matchbox-sized core piece of electronics and inserts it into an armband worn holster. That's Velcro and elastic, and the holster is secure and it snaps and locks in. And now they can simply go about their day, go about their shift, and really not have to interact at all with our technology, with this small wearable device that's on their arm. Now that connected worker and that wearable device begins gathering data from the environment around them about exposures and things that they're experiencing, and sending it back through our base station, which connects to the internet, and takes about 30 seconds really for data that's gathered on the arm of the worker to go to our cloud platform, get processed, and show up in a dashboard on any device, even a smartphone, when you're walking the factory floor, for leadership, for safety leaders. A couple of things to point out. One, these base stations I mentioned hold 20 wearable devices. They can be daisy chained together. We often put them at different entry and exit points throughout a facility. And they have other capabilities as well. They serve as a charging station. This wearable device can be worn by up to 2 shifts per day, and it gets returned here to the base station, so it can be checked out to the next worker. You don't even need one for every employee. They need to charge for the 3rd shift. This could be tied into a time clock system. Perhaps we've engineered it that way. And the way that this wearable device sends data back to this base station is via a Wi-Fi network, which in many organizations, manufacturing facilities, there are already IoT Wi-Fi networks being set up for exactly this kind of thing. A lot of organizations these days are experimenting with how to get data from things, right? Whether it be pieces of machinery or systems or equipment. And we're just riding on that same network, providing data from people. So then this base station connects to the internet. As I mentioned, that can be a wired connection. And we take care of all of that for our customers. So here's a close-up look at the wearable device itself, and many of the sensors are labeled here. You're probably wondering exactly what kind of data are these guys collecting or concerned with. I like to talk about this in terms of 4 general categories or types of data, groups, if you will. So first, let's talk about data about ever-changing environmental conditions in the top left there. You all know better than most that you and I might be standing on 2 different sides of a machine just a few feet apart from one another, but I might be experiencing dramatically different environmental impact than you. I might be getting a heavy sound dosage or sound exposure, while you might be getting exhaust off a machine and impact from poor air quality. So those are the kinds of things that we're collecting here. We're detecting temperature and humidity. We're able to calculate heat index in real time for every worker now and provide that information, that intelligence to safety leaders. We're seeing changes in sound exposure. We're monitoring sound in accordance with OSHA guidelines. Since we're 18 inches from the ear, from the head, we're monitoring multiple octaves, and we're calculating the time-weighted average of total sound exposure now in real time for every worker. So we can see when somebody has achieved their total daily allowance in the first couple of hours of their shift over the last 3 days. That defines a trend, a pattern. What is this guy doing differently? Is he wearing hearing protection? First of all, is he wearing hearing protection that's rated highly enough for the work he's doing if he's encountering that much sound? We're monitoring air quality. We do that in the form of TVOCs and CO2. That's total volatile organic compounds. Anything that gives off gases or fumes, glues, paints. We're not detecting yet any particulates in the air. I know how valuable that will be at some point. The reason is the sensor is far too large. It's too expensive, and it takes up an awful lot of battery power. So I see that as something on our roadmap where we can head. But when it comes to VOCs in the air, we're detecting all kinds of things that were previously unknown. Even when there are sophisticated, wall-mounted monitoring systems that are fixed, we're using consensus data from multiple wearables, and we're able to get a very, very accurate picture over time, even with a very inexpensive solution. So we're often found to have identified something that other systems have failed to identify, which is quite interesting. And we're detecting ambient light levels, so low light, no light levels. Those are the kinds of things that may impact productivity, may impact fatigue, and certainly present hazards to the worker. Second category here would be potentially hazardous human motion. A natural starting place for us was, can we detect in real time a slip? And is that different from a trip? Does that look different than a fall? And the answer was yes. We've now got substantial training data in our library of motions. So when we, via the wearable device, which uses accelerometers, we're monitoring movement in any direction. And when we detect movement that is abnormal or movement coupled with force, we gather up a little bit of a motion signature, we call it. That looks like squiggly lines on a graph. And we send that data immediately to our analytics platform, and we ask it, what type of movement was this? Was this a slip? Was this a trip? Was this a fall? And within moments, we can return a classification or a categorization of the type of movement it was. We've added to that the ability to see repetitive movement. So for individual occurrences, things like, pushing and pulling or slips and trips, I might want to go as a safety leader, talk with the worker and based on the data, observe what they're doing and ask what they're experiencing. If this is part of a trend, it might be something that I can address or mitigate and alleviate now. Maybe there's a hose across a walkway and there have been 3 trips in that area this morning. But also the look over time at overall worker physicality is quite fascinating. I'll give you a few examples of that, but I can now see a ranked list of the number of workers in a particular department, and those who are working harder than everyone else rise to the top. That begs questions like, what are they doing differently? Is this a training issue? Are they really working harder, or are there other factors at play? So we'll talk a little bit more about that motion in just a moment. This third category that I've named here, spatial awareness, is really location identification. We're not continuously tracking people, but when indicators like those I've been describing are detected, we identify where they're occurring. You could think of this like dropping a pin on a map. You begin to see the location of things that are being experienced, and patterns and trends begin to emerge. We overlay those locations on top of a facility floor plan or map, if you will, just a simple PDF like a tornado map, and we identify the locations of what's happening in real time. In addition to that, though, we can also see the proximity of one device to another and the proximity of a device to other things. So I can tell you that 18 months ago, the phrase contact tracing wasn't even in my vocabulary. But now, after we've all been dealing with the pandemic, everyone has heard this and realizes how important it is to be able to know who has spent time with others, who they've spent time with, how much time over the last 48 hours have these people been in contact for more than 15 minutes, total aggregate time. So we realized we could add that capability, and it would aid safety leaders and managers, operations managers, in providing notification. And in case you haven't heard this yet, that burden is definitely being placed on the employer. California and other states have already passed laws to this effect that say you have to have some method for identifying time spent together so that you can provide immediate notification. So we can do that with a click and immediately make that data available to leaders so that you can provide that notification. And a good example of how a worker's proximity to things might work, might be a benefit, is simply access control, controlling or restricting access to certain areas based on whose wearable device is detected, right? If an organization's got card readers on doors, they may not need cards anymore. The card reader can detect a wearable. We might be able to enable or disable a piece of machinery based on whose wearable device is detected. So these capabilities, these possibilities are definitely now being well received also, not just the safety aspects of what we're doing, but also kind of the connected worker or advanced manufacturing type capabilities of now having a connected worker in a manufacturing operation. And last but not least, there's a button in the middle of the device that you'll see here that allows a worker to push it. It has to intentionally be held down so it doesn't happen by accident. But once they do that, they enable the ability to record up to a 15-second voice memo. By speaking into the device, we capture that audio and we send it directly to safety leaders along with a voice to text transcription of what was said. So our intention was to break down those communication barriers between the frontline workers and their leadership, to improve communication of those near misses and good catches from the front lines. And we hear things all the time now, like I'm back here in a dark corner of the warehouse and somebody dropped a pallet in a walkway or in front of a door, or there's a stack of material that looks like it's going to fall over. Machine number 3 on the production line has an oil pan that looks like it's going to overflow. We hear things that really relate to process improvement suggestions. You'd be surprised at the number of voice memos that start with, "I've been meaning to tell somebody for a long time," and then wind up with a really, really useful suggestion from the front lines that leadership can take action on. And all too often, people don't want to stop what they're doing to go walk to the next building maybe and fill out some paperwork on something that hasn't even really happened, right? We all know that for the person who slips and hurts a knee, twists an ankle, breaks a wrist, there were most likely contributing leading indicators. The same thing most likely happened to other people and we just didn't know it. So this is a really powerful way to enable people to not have to stop being productive and report things that are important to them. See something, say something, right? Those observations from the front lines. And really, this is an opportunity for leaders to positively reinforce that behavior, encourage more of these voice memos, and take action on them in a collaborative way to let people know what you're doing as a result of what they told you. And that has an overall positive impact on organizational culture. So it's important to point out, I think here in the same breath, what we're not doing. We have a high degree of concern for worker privacy. We're not collecting anything that's personal or biometric or HIPAA covered. You'll notice that there were no sensors aimed inward looking at the worker. We're not detecting anything like heart rate or stress level or any of that. Instead, we're aiming these sensors outward into the environment around a worker and looking for exposures and hazards and things that they're experiencing. We're not continuously tracking people. There's no button I can push to find out where somebody is right now. We're not delivering any feedback to the worker, nothing visual or auditory or haptic feedback, no buzzers or whistles or bells going off on their arm. And the reason is early on, frontline workers and safety leaders told us that might create more of a distraction. It might disrupt or create more of a hazard even. And personally, I think nobody's going to want to wear something for very long if it's constantly reminding them that they're doing something wrong, if it's buzzing on their arm. And further, now that we're all having to manage through COVID, I think it's important to point out these are not personal devices. We're not asking anybody to use their personal smartphone at work. And they get returned back to that kiosk at the end of every shift. So we've had client organizations build sanitation schedules around shift change. They just get wiped down with an antibacterial wipe and they're ready to go for the next person to check out. That's another reason why the armband and holster aren't shared. They're unique to the worker, and just that core piece of electronics goes back to that base station. So the other half of what we're doing here is really our software platform. We call that Make You Smart. This, of course, is just a static view, but if there's anything that you notice here, I'd like that to be that things are grouped together and there's some big numbers and there's some color coding that's happening here. And really that's intended to draw your attention on any device, even on a smartphone, to the things that are the highest priorities to you. I'll tell you, these are grouped motion indicators and number of slips, trips, and falls in the latest motion indicators that have been experienced by workers. I can just with a touch or with a click drill into any of those and find out more about those slips or trips or falls or pushing and pulling and twisting and turning. These are environmental indicators, right? You see a big number here. That's heat index. If it's July and the overhead doors are open on the bays of the loading dock, then I know it's hot. Those may not be a priority for me today, but I might want to investigate high noise or air quality issues. You'll see here open trends. Those are really patterns that have been detected where there are multiple indicators that are all happening at the same time. In the assembly room, I might have had 3 slips in it, and it might be highly noisy in there. We see a couple of things here that we call hazard tracking and task tracking. Tasks are really a to-do list. So if somebody leaves me a voice memo and it says that we're out of supplies in the supply closet, I can immediately on my smartphone move that to a task list. And now I can begin to track that, assign it, make sure it gets followed up on and gets done. If we've had maybe a couple of slips in a certain area because we've got moisture accumulating or condensation accumulating on a concrete floor, those I can, with a click, turn into a hazard. And now I can track that hazard over time through the control process, the safety management process. And within days or weeks or month, we can take a look at the corrective measures, the control steps that have been implemented, and ensure that desired results have been achieved. Have we mitigated that hazard? So we're building tools like that into this very robust platform. We can see the latest voice memos here that have come in. And of course, this is just sort of a summary view for safety leaders, the main page of the dashboard, if you will. It shows things in a summary fashion, but you can drill into any of them. You can get to the granular details. If you're a large organization and maybe you have an industrial hygienist on your team or ergonomists, they can drill into data over time and find that very, very helpful. If you're a corporate level, executive level safety director and oversee many sites, you can see a multi-site view of your organization and take a look at what's happening at each site. So in addition to that, there's a whole lot of features and functionality built into this platform. Certainly would be happy to maybe show it in another webinar or another presentation when I get there to visit in person next time. Or if anybody would like to see more, I'd be happy to give you a walkthrough of it. But we're, pre-filling documentation. We're interfacing with OSHA e-file. We're trying to make life easier from the safety leader's point of view. And just recently, I'll even point out a couple of things. One, we've started a client advisory board that's made up really of safety leaders and customers and industrial hygienists and ergonomists and loss control, risk management professionals. And it's really their input that drives the development of our tools, our software, and what it does and how we're building this. Secondly, I just put out a press release a couple of weeks ago about a new feature that we're calling Motion Explorer, which allows for really a deeper dive into what types of motion people are experiencing, which is quite exciting. You might like more information on that, certainly on our website, or something we could talk about at another time. So that Make You Smart cloud platform is really at the center of our solution. And it's intended not just to take in data from our wearable devices, but also to take in data from other connected systems and equipment. And I'll give you a couple examples of this, but we're working with a couple of organizations that are gathering data from other parts of their operation. And when it makes sense, we're able to easily pull that data into our Make You Smart software platform and show it alongside our people data. Or if it makes sense, we can easily make data from our system available in other systems as well. So that really enables operations and production managers, in addition to safety leaders, to see data from all aspects of their operation and understand really what's going on in a variety of levels. I point this out. We talked a little bit about contact tracing, but it really hammers home the idea that we're not only seeing what's happening around this worker, but a variety of other things as well. We can see when workers are in close contact with each other and the amount of time that they spend together. We can now see when workers are within close proximity to things, and even enable the ability to know whether or not this worker should be operating that forklift, that kind of thing. So this is a quick look, a little bit of a look at a couple of things. On the right here, you'll see what location looks like to us. I mentioned we take in a facility floor plan and we begin to see where things are occurring within that operation, within that floor plan map. So we can drop pins on it, or this is sort of the Doppler radar view of where things are happening, the heat map, if you will. And on the left, we can easily see that the workers at the top have spent the most time with each other when it comes to having to provide notification if somebody's been exposed to a contagion or diagnosed with COVID, whatever the latest strain may be. So let's take a look at how data is being used within a variety of environments, and some examples of the types of experiences that our customers had. I'll start with this one. I love this example. The picture is very representative. We were at work in a 100-year-old manufacturing facility, a globally recognized name, and had multiple workers all wearing our Make You Safe device. Several of them were in a line, all working on the same type of workstation, doing the same kind of job, same process. And one worker in particular repeatedly was exhibiting a high force motion indicator that we couldn't classify. None of the other workers who were doing the same work showed that sign. So we asked safety leaders, what do you think's happening with this guy? We'd like to learn. And they said, oh, that's just Victor. He does things a little bit differently. He's been here a long time, great worker, great guy, but he's a little herky-jerky in his movements. So next time we were on site, we asked, can we see Victor? Help understand a little bit more about what he's doing. And they, of course, said yes. And Victor was blown away that anybody cared enough to come talk with him and ask what he was experiencing. And he said, oh, I think I know what you're probably picking up. None of the leadership team knows this because I haven't told them yet, but I've got sort of a nagging shoulder injury, which, immediately got their attention. We were there with the global safety director and shift leaders and safety managers, and none of them knew this. And then we asked, well, Victor, why does it seem to get more dramatic later in the week? And he said, oh, I can probably explain that too. I go to the chiropractor on the weekend. So Monday and Tuesday, I'm usually feeling pretty good. By Wednesday, it starts to hurt. And by, end of week, I'm usually in a little bit of pain. So this was a unionized shop that was self-insured. And we walked away from that conversation with the safety leadership team saying, you probably really helped us dodge a bullet here, because we've seen this kind of thing before, and those cumulative trauma injuries, that impact that things are having on workers' bodies over time tends to cost us about $175,000. So what's the value of a granular bit of data? Even when it doesn't know exactly what's happening, it provides you focus so that you can have a conversation and understand more about what's going on with those workers. Here's another example. On a construction site, we excuse me, have multiple examples of how we've detected high noise environments. In this particular example, we had a worker that was routinely reaching 90% of their daily noise dosage after just a few hours on the job. This worker was cutting concrete. In this particular case, the safety leader was able to immediately identify that he was supposed to be wearing hearing protection but wasn't. That would have resulted in an incident. We've had multiple examples where somebody was wearing hearing protection, but probably should have been doubling up on hearing protection because of the work that they were doing. We've had lots of examples of high noise exposure with workers who weren't anticipated to be experiencing that much noise just because of the piece of equipment they were using. One of them was a noisy pressure washer, and nobody realized it was that level of sound exposure. In one case, which is fascinating to me, and it was the same kind of thing. Somebody was cutting concrete. Those workers weren't exhibiting high noise dosage. They were wearing the proper hearing protection, but it was a neighboring team or crew that was doing work in close proximity to where cutting was being done. So, if you will, they were experiencing secondhand noise dosage, and nobody had thought about that. So there's some good examples there of sound. Here's a terrific example of that new feature that I was referring to earlier that we call Motion Explorer. We were at work in a Fortune 500 company, and we deployed Make You Safe on workers at 4 different sites throughout the United States. All of these sites were doing exactly the same work. The buildings were laid out the same way. They had the same work roles. And what we noticed after just 90 days was that one site in particular had a couple of job roles that were working 750% more physically than the other 3 sites. They were putting forth more effort to get the same work done. That was really fascinating to the safety leadership team at a corporate level. Their ergonomists began to study this, and process changes were implemented as a result. But that all started with the question, what's happening here? Are these people working harder? Are they doing something differently? If everybody's working in similar operations, doing the same jobs, what's going on that's different? So we did talk a little bit about that voice memo recording feature, pushing a button, holding it down, and having the ability to record a voice memo. And those within seconds show up even on a smartphone for the safety leader. You get a clickable, playable audio file that you can listen to even on a smartphone. And I'll tell you, even in some dramatic environments like a steel foundry, which is quite noisy, the audio quality is excellent. And you also get a voice to text translation. So here's some examples of the importance of those voice memos. In one case, right after training, a worker went back to his workstation, pushed the button, and said, I think this is how you told me it's supposed to work, but I've been meaning to tell somebody for a long time that there's an intermittent short in this piece of production line equipment. In this case, there was a safety leader who immediately went and took a look. We were also working through an insurance partner that carried the work comp coverage. So their loss control teams were interested in the data as well. The safety leader found that this was indeed a shock hazard and could have impacted the worker. When the insurer showed up, they found that this was a fire hazard in addition to that. And ironically, they also carried the property casualty insurance. So this could have been a dramatic loss. So what's the value of a 15-second voice memo? Well, it certainly enables people to tell you as a leadership team about those things that they think are important that probably go vastly underreported. Nobody takes the time to remember on their way out of the building to let somebody know these things. So here's another good example. Again, on a construction site, we've experienced a couple actually falls from height, and if you're keeping score here, that's probably not something we would prevent with the type of data that we're collecting. On the other hand, these workers were tethered and harnessed, and therefore they were safe. But there's some interesting examples that come out of this. In one case, a worker was doing work on a roof, which was a high-pitched roof, and was sliding down the roof at such a slow pace, but continuing to slide, that his retractable tether wasn't catching. He used the voice memo reporting capability to let leadership know. I'll say that we're not attempting or trying to really be an immediate, life-saving device. We're not a man-down alert, although in this case, that voice memo feature was used that way. We had another worker report that he was caught but suspended and needed help getting down. So I'm sure all of you are very familiar with hang trauma, I think is the term that's used to refer to that. And really it's within minutes that somebody needs assistance in getting down. Here's an example of Make You Safe wearable, identifying high levels in terms of parts per billion, concentration of VOCs in the air around a worker. In fact, at a couple of different sites. In these cases, it was really interesting that they had very sophisticated fixed systems in place that were supposed to monitor the air. In one case, what they found was the daylight savings time changes weren't reflected in the scheduling of when those air handlers got turned on. So concentrations were building up in the air before workers got to work, and simply by adjusting the scheduling and turning air handlers on an hour early, they kept workers from experiencing those. In one case, we had a monitoring system that was very expensive, not showing anything being abnormal, and our wearable devices, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, rely on consensus data. So it's really not just what one inexpensive wearable shows, but really multiple wearables all showing the same thing. And we had that occurrence. So our wearables were showing something very different from the in-house system. And in multiple cases, we were found that the in-house system was not reporting accurately, even though we're using sensors that are really cost pennies a piece to keep costs down. We're able to provide a very, very accurate picture. So here's another example. In a food processing environment, food packaging, workers We're using a lot of granulated powdered ingredients, and the safety leadership team knew that there were nylon mallets or bats available for workers to break up crystallized materials, paddles, if you will. But they thought that it wasn't occurring very often. They had no idea that their aging workforce was having to do that with every load and the amount of force that was being used by these workers over time. So steps were taken immediately to alleviate that kind of movement from that process. In this case, I think this organization even took up the issue with their suppliers because material wasn't supposed to be coming in the back door that way. So I show this to you just because you may be wondering, great technology, Tom, but what's this going to cost? We're doing this for really tens of dollars, very inexpensively. Everything is built around this all-inclusive model of $22 per wearable device per month. And that's access to everything. If a wearable is shared between different shifts, that can be as low as $11 per worker. And that's sort of on par with, you know, probably less expensive than what a decent pair of work gloves costs. You know, a good example would be if everybody in your organization knows that if they put their safety glasses on, eye injuries go down by more than 90%, then why wouldn't they wear a piece of technology that helps gather data that can help us understand risks and exposures better and enable safety leaders to work more effectively to eliminate those hazards from the work environment? So I'm interested in your questions and comments. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and turn my camera back on. I think we've got just another minute or two. But guys, Rich and Zach, are there any questions that anyone might have, or maybe you want to enable everyone's microphone so that they could speak up if they have questions?
Hey, Tom, I do have a question, and my question is a lot of times with manufacturing, if engineer needs new tools or equipment, they're able to justify that, and then, you know, what I'm really talking about is return on investment. So do you guys have a template or a tool that you offer to those that might want to explore this and look at a return on investment? Because that's really who's going to make the decision if your wearables or anybody's wearables is going to be the holy grail or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question and an important one. I've got a couple of assets available that I could provide just in terms of an email. You know, Rich, you're, you know, writing work comp, you're an agent broker, and you represent a couple of carriers that we're doing business with. In some cases, we have studies from those carriers involving policyholders over a short period of time that shows the types of things that were identified and the value of those things in terms of losses avoided. But really the best thing to do would be to have a conversation with us. Love to understand. That's how we learn. Love to understand a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve if somebody is interested, and then we can provide you with some tools in order to, you know, communicate that upward within your organization. Yeah, great question. I'll tell you, early pilots that we did in 2019, we wrapped up with those were paid pilots with end user industrial organizations as well as some insurers being involved. We wrapped up those pilots conservatively estimating well in excess of 1,000% ROI. And that was in the eyes of the insurers and the customers. So when something was detected, we asked them, you know, would this likely have resulted in an occurrence if it were to remain unknown? And when they said yes, then we asked, what does this typically cost you? So it wasn't our numbers, it was really theirs.
Okay. And another question I have is, I can see how something like this really works nicely with general industry. What about construction? Do you have any customers, clients that are involved in the construction world?
Yeah,
Use-
many actually. So, when two guys get in a pickup truck and go out for the day, we haven't typically been able to address that, but I'll come back to that in just a minute because we're on the cusp of it. But for a fixed job site where workers come on site, stay there all day, we've got multiple construction companies, general contractors that are using us, as well as their subcontractors. Some of them are very large projects, very large construction companies with multiple stakeholders, multiple subcontractors. And, in cases where the infrastructure just hasn't been available yet. That used to be limiting for us. We would say we probably aren't ready for the construction industry yet a few years ago, but we found that safety leaders who were forward thinking actually wanted the data even if they couldn't get it in real time. So at the end of a shift, when that wearable device gets returned to that base station, it uploads data then. It's got a lot of memory built into it. And that's how we started on a couple of construction sites until there was Wi-Fi coverage, which got added over time. And coming back to those remote workers or field workers, within a few weeks here, we're about to release that capability. So now my wearable device in the morning can be paired with my company issued smartphone. And now when I hop in my truck and go out on the road or go out on a route all day, my wearable device begins sending data that is GPS enriched through my smartphone. So in real time, a safety leader at a corporate level or back at the main location can see that data.
Okay. And a third question. With the post or, going through COVID, a lot of office workers now have the ability to work remotely. And those workers also see this as a benefit. In fact, people will quit their jobs and go somewhere else where they can work remotely from their own homes. With that said, if somebody gets hurt at home while working, it could be a claim, right? Yet somebody like myself can't really go to their house and do an inspection to see if there are any hazards, ergo concerns, and that type of thing. Have you had anybody ask for your devices to be used on the population of these remote workers?
Not yet, not yet. I mean, we're focused on fixed workplaces, mostly industrial environments, construction environments. We're now addressing that remote worker, field worker, like we were talking about. There are other applications too. I mean, one good example is probably healthcare, right? Patient transfer or patient lift and carry is just a high hazard type of activity. We haven't yet been put to work in healthcare, but I know we've had an awful lot of interest. That's just a matter of time. Home office workers may be a possibility too. That may be the first time I've been asked that this year, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Because the reason why I say that is, when people are working in the office, typically they're working with ideal office furniture. They've got the room, they've got the platforms, they got the right chairs. And then I might get a call where somebody has neck and shoulder pains, and then I see their workstation at home, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
But they're dealing with what they have, and they're just not aware of the ergo hazards associated with what they do. They just see this as, hey, this is my little small closet, and this is how I do it when I work at home.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, not today, but who knows? We have a pretty robust and impressive roadmap for future capabilities that we're always working on. So maybe one day.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions for Tom?
Yep, I've got one, Tom. Question for you. Are you able to turn off or turn on certain functions? And what I'm getting at, when I worked in manufacturing, I knew I had a hazard in the summer of heat stress. So I knew my employees were exposed to it. We did everything we could to reduce the exposure. But if I had that armband on, I know it'd be going off for every employee wearing it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll comment that. Great question. I'll answer that this way. We are very sensitive, and of course we hear a lot about, and we're thinking actively about what we call alert fatigue, right? Chris, if you're the safety leader, do you want to get a notification every time if it's July, somebody's experiencing high heat index? So we've minimized those alerts, first of all, and we've enabled any safety leader, any user of our software platform to, first of all, snooze any kind of alerts if they're not a priority for you. And what that does is, you can snooze it for a period of time, but in case you forget about it, once summer's over, maybe we want it to be active again. So you got to go back in and snooze it. And that way, you're staying engaged. Secondly, you can receive notifications of things that are high priorities. So maybe it's not high heat index, but I would suggest everybody wants to receive an immediate notification if a worker leaves me a voice memo, right? If somebody takes the time to try to tell me something that's on their mind or important to them, even if it's easy for me to deal with or explain, I still want to hear them. And I want to encourage more of those voice memo reports. So that's the kind of thing that you can opt in to receive immediate notifications about. And you can get those as a text message on your phone, and walking around the shop floor. That's the kind of thing you may want to hear about immediately, but we certainly realize that there are a lot of those things that we don't shut off the sensors, because 6 months from now, it might be interesting for somebody on your team to take a look at all of that heat data and see where it's happening. Is it happening where we thought it was happening, or are there things in there that were unknown? So, with that said, we're actively working with a lot of organizations, some of whom are extraordinarily busy during this shopping time of the holidays, I'll say. Some very large shipping operations, and they've got special requirements that we're always willing to work with customers on. There's, in fact, in some facilities, there's so much happening via Wi-Fi in their operation that they don't want us sending data via Wi-Fi. So we found other ways to do that. We're at work with some companies that are I'm sure you guys have dealt with this, organizations that are constantly shifting people from one line to another, right? That happens all over. That's a big, big problem. We don't know exactly where people are. We don't know what they're experiencing, and we can't maximize or optimize their efficiency because they're moving around so much. We don't know how many people are on a line. So we're actually speeding up and slowing down production operations based on the number of workers with wearables that are detected on a line. That's quite fascinating to us. So there are an awful lot of possibilities. If we can get a conversation started, usually we can learn about what is important to an organization, what they're trying to achieve, and chances are we've probably thought about ways to accomplish this.
Gotcha. Cool.
Great question. Any others?
I have a quick one. This is Dave Heisen. As an industrial hygienist, I understand the use of CO2 from an air quality standpoint of air changes, but it really doesn't tell you a whole lot more than that. I mean, in the total VOCs too, I mean, if Rich has got somebody at home and he's got his smoker going, then we're going to end up some problems with that too if he's working at home. So what I'm just saying is how useful is that, or is it just to give you an idea, or I mean, how are you using that?
That's a really good question. And, no surprise, the industrial hygienist in the group has one of those for me because they're usually the hard questions to deal with. It took me a long time to get really comfortable. I'll tell you, we're using a very inexpensive sensor that detects, and it's a combination sensor. So total VOCs, and CO2 is a benefit of this sensor. And it won't tell us what VOC somebody is experiencing, but it will tell us that it's outside of normally, generally accepted ranges. Now, how useful is that, Dave? That's a really good question. We've actually uncovered a lot of examples of things in the air that were unidentified, and because our sensors detected high concentrations, then further study or investigation could be done by an industrial hygienist with a more sophisticated instrument. All too often, those air quality surveys aren't done, more than annually.